So Atelier Yumia comes out tomorrow, and I was actually pretty excited to check it out. I've never experienced the series before, and its new entries seem much more dynamic than the older ones. Sadly, I've been sick for literally the entire review week, so I haven't had enough time with my review copy for even a first impressions. And for a slower paced narrative like this, I figured I shouldn't rush it. So today we're taking a look at how it performs on SteamDeck, and I'll even compare it with some footage of the game's demo on Switch. That's right, there's a demo on all major platforms, so if this game looks interesting, feel free to check it out for yourself. Save progress carries over to the full game. One last thing to note before getting into deck footage is that even on Windows I've noticed some performance issues with the game. It's nothing game breaking, but I feel like the game could use a little bit more optimization. Even a PC that beats the recommended specs, my 2060 Super had some trouble maintaining 1080p 60 with a mix of high and medium settings. The game lacks support for DLSS and even FSR, so your only option is Intel's upscaling tech. Even at just 1080p I had to turn down a few settings. It was mostly smooth with just a few dropped frames, but 1440p, even with balanced upscaling, was much more unstable, despite it being usable in much more graphically intensive games. Now with that in mind, let's take a look at the opening cinematic. On the left we have the Switch, and on the right is SteamDeck with the lowest settings, but XESS disabled. I'd say for this specific shot they're almost identical, with maybe some slightly better lighting on the SteamDeck, but it's really hard to tell in a simple shot like this. Next we have this little tutorial fight, and I think the SteamDeck pulls ahead a little bit in here in terms of clarity, but the Switch just clearly beats out the low quality textures on the deck. This continues to the next cutscenes as well. Even with the fairly simple designs, you can see clearly how blurry their clothing are on deck. Even with the better sharpness and lighting, they just look so much detail is missing, to the point where they can look wildly different. I'd argue both look good overall, and it's interesting to compare to see what cutback the Switch did over the lowest PC settings to make the game work. But I think it's now pretty clear we should be able to bump up just a few more things on deck and still maintain 30 FPS just like Switch. Alright, from here on out these are the settings we'll be using. 720p, full screen, everything set to low, but pushing texture quality up to standard. Actually, we can probably try standard shadows as well. We'll add some TAA, depth of field, and I think that's good. Let's compare real quick. SteamDeck low on the left, our adjustments on the right, and as you can see, we cleaned it up pretty nicely. So let's see how it compares to the Switch. And there we go, a much better match for the Switch's texture quality. Alright, now let's explore the dungeon a bit more. While the SteamDeck looks better overall, I still think the Switch holds up very well in the small dungeon portion. So I'd be interested to see if things change once we head outside. Maybe we'll even have to turn down some settings on the deck. Also, while the Switch's cutscenes don't appear to be pre-rendered, it does look like they might be switching to a higher graphics preset for them. This may explain how they're able to get closer to the SteamDeck's look in terms of clarity during these moments, and I don't think it's just because they're doing close-up. Alright, one last thing before we head out, let's take a look at this tutorial boss fight. Alright, now that you've made it outside, let's see how the Switch handles these areas first. Right off the bat, things look a little low resolution. I think it's easier to notice now since we can see things further off into the distance. We have a few tufts of grass that seem to pop in, but they also kind of do so randomly, as if they're like scattered all over the place. The game still runs pretty well for now, and I feel like the game's art style is strong enough to make up for the lower quality assets. The SteamDeck settings I made work pretty well in the open world so far. There have been some minor frame dips just like on PC, so we might potentially want to turn down shadow quality or something for a locked 30 FPS, but overall for a handheld I'm pretty happy with how it looks and runs. We also have much fuller foliage and reflection from the water too. Oh, this is interesting. It looks like the Switch version actually features a quality mode. Let me know if you can tell a difference between the two. I can't really tell without zooming in. For reference, here's how quality mode pairs up with the SteamDeck's tweaked settings. Alright, well the title said this was supposed to be a fairly quick comparison. I don't really have the equipment for anything in-depth, so before my voice goes out, I'll end off with my final thoughts. Overall, this can look and run pretty okay on SteamDeck. No fancy tweaks or mods required. I'm using the game with Proton Experimental, and using the deck's built-in FSR to scale at 1080p for recording. Oh, and you'll probably want to adjust the default graphics settings to make it a little bit more playable. I can't say for sure how much performance will improve by launch, but I can say I'd argue that you probably can expect Switch-level performance with better image quality across the board. But I get that some people don't want to mess with a bunch of settings, and if all you want to do is just pop in the game and play, then I definitely say go for the Switch experience. It still does look pretty good, and you don't have to mess with any settings to get the best experience. Just leave it at stock performance mode. A Steam Deck's not really that hard to set up if you have pretty much any experience with PC gaming. All I'd recommend is starting on a low preset, turn off XESS, and change the standard quality textures. You're pretty much fine from there, and you can mess around with whatever else you want only if you want to. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Special thanks to Koei Tecmo for the review code, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!